All right. Question number 19. Determine whether the outcome is a type 1 error, a type 2 error, or a correct decision. A test is made up of the null hypothesis, mu equals 28, versus the alternative hypothesis, mu does not equal to 28. The true value of mu is 29, and the null is rejected. Okay, before I get into that, I'm going to display the two diagrams I have here. Now, most of you guys probably seen this one down here. However, I'm not really a fan of using this table, so I have my own little diagram right here. So, first thing is first, let's look at what happens in the study. We can either reject the null hypothesis or do not reject the null hypothesis. Some people say accept the null hypothesis. And then we have reality. Either reality shows the null is true or reality shows that the null is false. Then we have the outcome. So we can reference questions 17 and 18 from the last video to help us out with this problem. If you are rejecting the null, but the null is true, that is a type 1 error. And as you can see, reject the null, null is true, type 1 error. If we reject the null hypothesis and the null is false, that is a correct decision because we are rejecting false information. The other option is do not reject the null hypothesis. If we do not reject the null hypothesis and the null is true, that is a correct decision. Because if you do not reject the null hypothesis, you can say you're accepting the null hypothesis. And if the null is true, you are accepting true information. That is a correct decision. But when you do not reject the null hypothesis and the null is false, that is a type 2 error because you are accepting false information. Accepting false information, type 2 error. So, first thing is first, let's determine if we're rejecting or not rejecting the null hypothesis. Let's write our two hypotheses, by the way. The null hypothesis is mu equals to 28, and the alternative hypothesis, mu does not equal to 28. It says that the null is rejected. So since the null is rejected, I'm going to put an X through my null hypothesis. Based on the fact that the null is rejected, we have two decisions we can have. It can be a type 1 error now, or it can be a correct decision. So in our study, we rejected the null. I'm going to put study over here as well. In red, we're going to focus on reality. Reality, it says that the true value of mu is 29. So, is the null true or is the null false? The null says mu equals 28, but in reality, mu is 29. That means that the null hypothesis is false. Once again, the null hypothesis states that mu is 28. In reality, mu is 29. So that means that the null hypothesis is false. We rejected false information. We made a correct decision. The answer to this question is a correct decision. And that is it for number 19. Once again, determine if you reject your null hypothesis, then look at what you have in reality and see, does the mu that we have in reality indicate that the null is true or if the null is false? In this case, because mu is 29, and for the null hypothesis, it says mu is 28, that means that the null hypothesis is false. Null is rejected. The null is false. Rejecting false information. Correct decision. Take care.